I said sorry for things I didn't do. I apologized for his anger, his unfaithfulness, his lies. Here's how he trained me to take the blame and how I finally stopped. The last time it happened, I was standing in the kitchen, utterly paralyzed, the air thick with tension you could literally almost taste, like ozone before a storm. It wasn't just silence. It was a pressurized, toxic atmosphere, deliberately manufactured and waiting for me to make the smallest mistake, to fail the impossible test, and provide the cue for his next inevitable eruption. He just finished explaining, in a perfect, cold, and utterly detached, legalistic detail, how my tone, the way I had dared to ask a simple, polite question about his schedule, perhaps suggesting a joint activity or simply inquiring about dinner plans, had personally and fundamentally offended him. He argued, with chilling self-conviction, that my voice had carried an insinuation of deep criticism, a latent disrespect for his time and status, and this perceived attack had left him no rational choice but to speak loudly and demonstrate his superior frustration and moral outrage. I watched the tile floor, fixated not just on a tiny crack near the refrigerator, but on the dust motes suspended in the air, seeking any objective distraction, refusing to meet his eyes because I knew that eye contact would only accelerate the final, painful, dominating phase of the confrontation. I felt my lungs tighten, not because of the genuine absurdity of his twisted logic, but because I was trapped in a familiar, horrible loop that demanded my complete, immediate, and illogical surrender to his narrative. I knew the script by heart. It always, without fail, ended with me taking the full responsibility for his uncontrolled emotions and destructive behavior. I was the safe valve for his volatile rage, the keeper of his false peace. My gut screamed at me, a sharp internal alarm that sounded like a klaxon blaring relentlessly in my core. The rational part of my mind, fighting through the fog, detailed the facts. He broke the lamp when he slammed the door after receiving a text message that clearly angered him. Not you. You were quiet. You were simply sitting on the couch, reading a book, completely uninvolved. But the words were already forming, heavy, suffocating, and rote, escaping before my rational mind could stop them. They were an automatic survival response, a desperate, preemptive attempt to end the conflict quickly before it escalated into something worse, something more physically and emotionally damaging. I'm truly sorry. I shouldn't have made you so upset. I'll watch my tone next time. I know you've been under a lot of pressure. I was apologizing for the objective reality of the situation, knowingly and willingly replacing it with his preferred, distorted version. I said sorry for the things he did, not just the minor annoyances and miscommunications, but the enormous, unforgivable trespasses against our life and my personal well-being. I apologized for his heavy consumption of substances, which he claimed was my fault for stressing him out with my demands and expectations. I apologized for his unexplained all-night absences, which he blamed on my nagging questions about his whereabouts, suggesting my lack of trust drove him away. I apologized for the cruel, personalized words he'd spit when he was frustrated or cornered, words that always seemed surgically designed to find my deepest, most private insecurities and exploit them. He didn't even have to ask me for the apology anymore. The silence, the tense glare, the withdrawal of affection, these were themselves a chilling demand. I offered the apology up like a sacrifice of my own truth, a twisted peace offering that was meant to buy me a few hours of calm, just to see the visible tension drain from his shoulders and get him to look at me with that brief, sweet, intoxicating flash of approval. The look that said, "You are back in my good graces, and I accept your submission and your sacrifice." That moment of relief, that brief return of light, was the only thing that mattered. It was a jackpot. I was enduring terrible, sustained, chronic behavior, the constant, grinding fear of the unknown, the relentless verbal lashings that sliced deep into my sense of self-worth, the profound confusion over what was objectively real, just for the fleeting return of the man I first met, the one who told me we were instant soulmates, that our connection was destiny, a cosmic, one-in-a-million occurrence that no one else could understand. That man, the one who love-bombed me with attention, adoration, and devotion, felt like the only real version of him worth fighting for and saving. And I was convinced, absolutely certain, in the depths of my confusion, that if I just took the blame for his brokenness, if I just absorbed the pain and the responsibility for his entire life, I could somehow save us both and restore that beautiful, intoxicating illusion we started with before the darkness came. I remember the rush of those early days with painful, sharp clarity. It moved so fast, an immediate, high-intensity connection that felt like nothing I'd ever experienced before, a whirlwind that left me dizzy, breathless, and completely disconnected from my old life, my old friends, and my old sense of stability. He moved in dramatic, overwhelming waves of charm and intensity, bombarding me with affirmation, making me feel essential, chosen, and irreplaceable, like I was truly the magnetic axis of his entire complicated world. I completely mistook the deep, constant anxiety and the feeling of perpetually walking on eggshells, which was actually legitimate fear and terror, for profound passion, for romantic excitement that only happens in movies. I tragically misread the fear of his withdrawal and violent mood shifts as profound attachment, as a sign of how deeply and desperately he cared about me. I desperately wanted to believe the manufactured narrative. This intensity is chemistry. This chaos is love. This must be what true, deep, passionate connection feels like, even if it feels like my heart is constantly breaking. But what I was actually craving wasn't him or the relationship itself. It was the moment the tension broke, the unpredictable reward of affection that followed the punishment. Like a slot machine, he only paid out sometimes. A sudden, lavish compliment, a genuine-sounding tearful apology that felt like sunshine and warmth returning, a remorseful kiss, a fleeting moment of deep, vulnerable connection that promised the good times were definitely back to stay forever. That agonizing inconsistency, that intermittent reinforcement made me desperately hooked on the cycle itself, creating a neurological dependency. It was the hope of the high, the desperate, constant pursuit of the reconciliation, not the reality of the cruel person, that kept me tethered and compliant. I wasn't in love with the real him. I was chasing the chemical high of the reconciliation and the temporary illusion of safety that always followed the storm. I knew my sanity was genuinely, tangibly on the line. I was perpetually in a state of physical withdrawal when he was gone, or emotionally distant, manifesting as a deep, sickening anxiety that felt like my organs were failing, unable to focus at work, unable to relax even in a quiet room, unable to make simple decisions until he returned or reached out to stabilize the chaos he created. I desperately used his difficult childhood, his sad backstory, and his past traumas as a constant backstory excuse for his cruel actions. He's just stressed. He was hurt before. He doesn't mean it. He's just wounded. If I leave, he'll have no one, and he'll never recover from his past. I was rationalizing his behavior, not for his sake, but for my own survival, to reduce the horrible, paralyzing crunch of the internal conflict, the vast, soul-crushing gap between the loving, charismatic man I had fallen for and the abusive, cold man standing in front of me. I had to believe the abuse wasn't real, or my entire world, the entire structure of our relationship would crumble, taking my identity, my future plans, and all my emotional investment with it. The pressure to make the pieces fit was enormous, relentless, and it was crushing me under its unbearable weight. The exhaustion was absolute, bone deep, spiritual, and chronic. Sleep offered no real rest because my mind was constantly on alert, running scenarios and rehearsing apologies. Every day, I woke up with the self-imposed mandate to manage his turbulent emotions and anticipate his moods before they could shift into rage or withdrawal. I had to be the perfect partner, the perfect apology machine, the perfect container for his rage and insecurity, just to earn a few hours of uneasy, temporary peace and avoid the next conflict. I was a prisoner in a highly restrictive psychological relationship built entirely on my own self-blame and the surrender of my reality. I became his mirror, meticulously reflecting back the flawless perfection he demanded the world see, while internally I was slowly and quietly disintegrating, losing all sense of who I was outside of his immediate demands and needs. And then the whispers started. They weren't coming from him directly, which would have been easier to dismiss as his opinion, but through the mouths of mutual acquaintances and old friends I rarely saw. It was a calculated, insidious attack on my external validation. My friend Sarah, who hadn't called me just to chat in months, reached out with a strange, overly concerned check-in. Her voice was strained, laced with fake sympathy that felt colder than real indifference. "Are you okay, truly? I'm just worried about your heavy consumption of substances lately and how you've been talking to people. My mistress told me you've been having a hard time coping with your anxiety and depression, and she's so worried about you and your erratic, dramatic behavior." This was a weaponized concern. I hadn't been consuming substance heavily. I barely partook at all, especially not during his episodes. The accusation was startlingly specific and completely untrue. But there was an insidious twist I hadn't prepared for. The sudden isolation had begun. People I thought were neutral or true friends suddenly went cold or distant without explanation, their demeanor shifting from warm and open to wary, judgmental, and distrustful overnight. He wasn't just abusing me in private. He was running a comprehensive, preemptive smear campaign against my character, creating a false, ugly narrative before I could escape or speak up, to ensure that when I finally did talk about his actions, no one in our shared world would believe me. He was strategically laying the groundwork to publicly discredit me as a mentally unstable liar, a master manipulator, or an emotional burden. He was using a clear, manipulative tactic of deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender, Darvo. He was telling people he was the one suffering, portraying himself as the long-suffering victim of my instability and my erratic behavior, painting himself as the constant martyr. He was successfully recruiting people, his flying monkeys, to probe me with leading, intrusive questions, harass me with concern, and spread his narrative further into my professional and social circles. He was accusing me of being crazy, emotionally abusive, and unstable, projecting the exact controlling and abusive behavior he was doing to me in secret. It was projection on a grand scale, a meticulous, strategic campaign to ensure he remained the hero, the good person, and I became the villain, the one who was unwell. He was managing his public image of perfection while systematically destroying my reputation and support system piece by piece. He intensified this internal torment by constantly telling me others were saying bad things about me, twisting my words and actions into something toxic and unrecognizable. He used triangulation as a constant tool, citing non-existent warnings from others to make me feel completely dependent on him for truth and safety. See? Only I know the real you. Everyone else judges you and thinks you're losing it, but I'm the only one here who stands by you. The confusion was deliberately designed to erode my confidence, make me doubt my own mind, my own reality, and my own memories of events, sealing the bond through mutual perceived persecution. But the confusion was clearing, and the pervasive, sickening fear was giving way to an intense, icy clarity that felt strangely powerful, like adrenaline mixed with truth. I realized I wasn't just a victim reacting to pain. I was a strategically targeted player facing an opponent determined to win at all costs, even if it meant my utter destruction and social exile. I realized I had to shift my entire focus from passively surviving his moods to actively counter-moving with strategy, logic, and self-preservation. I had to stop apologizing for his crimes and start strategizing my total escape and defense. The realization hit me with the unexpected, sharp, physical force of an impact. The apology I was always ready to give was just another, easily replaceable brick in the wall of his narcissistic facade. My job was not to be a partner, but an unpaid, disposable crisis manager, tasked with keeping his perfect public image intact by absorbing all the blame, all the consequences, and all the shame he couldn't hold. It was a transaction of my sanity for his image, and I was bankrupt. The final time he tried to make me apologize for his explosive tantrum, I stopped the script mid-sentence. I physically froze. I did not move. I did not utter a single word of regret or submission. The silence hung between us, heavy and unnatural, threatening to shatter the fragile atmosphere he controlled. I looked past him at the broken pieces of the lamp on the floor, and I finally saw the truth, not as an emotional wound I needed to heal with submission, but as a strategic error in his play I needed to correct by drawing a firm, permanent line. I felt that familiar cold dread rise up, but beneath it, a tiny, hard core of resolve formed, like metal hardening in my center, and it was infinitely stronger than the fear. He waited, his face expectant, the demand for my surrender clear and absolute in his eyes. I didn't give it. I held my ground. I inhaled deeply, grounding myself in the reality of the broken lamp. Instead, I met his gaze directly and simply said, slowly and clearly, my voice steady, betraying none of the internal terror, I recognize what you're doing right now. I see the manipulation. This is your pattern and your method, and I won't participate in it anymore. I am not responsible for your actions, and I will not apologize for them. His mask didn't just slip, it shattered entirely, breaking into a million sharp, dangerous pieces. The charming soulmate, the gentle, wounded man I thought I loved, vanished in an instant, replaced by something cold and calculating. In its place was a look of pure, cold, unadulterated rage, mixed with the shock and momentary disorientation of losing complete control and being so completely seen. The man I thought I was saving ceased to exist forever. The abuse, the controlling, the gaslighting, that was the real, authentic person he had been hiding all along. The initial love bombing, the passionate chemistry, the instant connection, that was the calculated, elaborate lie designed specifically to hook me and keep me silent, compliant, and contained. That was the counter move that changed everything. I stopped feeding the addiction. I stopped justifying the chaos. I finally accepted, fully and irrevocably, that the charming version of him was only the bait, the temporary lure, and the cruel version was the single, horrifying, authentic reality. I wasn't going to try to heal his unbearable sadness anymore, because he wasn't sad. He was calculating. I was going to save myself, and only myself. You need to understand that the intense, painful pull you feel back toward him is not love. It's a terrifying, powerful pull driven by a chemical dependency on the cycle of tension and relief. To break this trauma bond, you must treat it exactly like an addiction, because the biological response in your brain, the dopamine surge following stress relief, is functionally identical. The feeling of missing him is not love, it's your brain craving the reconciliation high, the familiar rush of the tension breaking, not the actual abusive person who caused the tension in the first place. This realization is your first line of defense. You have to enforce no contact without compromise, because the sporadic, unpredictable rewards, the intermittent reinforcement, are so powerful and addictive. Total, absolute abstinence is often the only sustainable way to break the chemical hook and allow your nervous system to fully regulate and recover. If full no contact is impossible, perhaps due to shared custody of children or unavoidable work situations, you must strictly implement low contact or the gray rock method. Make yourself as boring, non-reactive, and emotionally uninvested as humanly possible. Become a literal gray rock, bland, impenetrable, and uninteresting. Give nothing of yourself, your energy, or your feelings. Expect nothing from him in return. You must engage in reality testing as a daily, non-negotiable exercise. This is not a casual memory exercise. It's a critical, life-saving self-defense mechanism against the gaslighting that attempts to redefine your history. Keep a written ledger, a dated, detailed, objective list of the cruel messages, the broken promises, the abusive incidents, the times you were forced to apologize for his mistakes. Detail the lies and the manipulations you endured. When you feel that addictive urge to return or to rationalize his actions, you must stop, breathe, and read that list out loud. It will powerfully remind you of the concrete, undeniable reality versus the seductive, dangerous fantasy you were addicted to. When you feel the overwhelming, urgent, panic-fueled urge to reach out or to respond to a manipulative attempt to reconnect, a Hoover attempt, you must immediately delay the response. The urgency you feel is a classic biological symptom of the trauma bond craving the next hit of validation or crisis. The feeling is the addiction. Do not act on that feeling for instant relief. Tell yourself you must wait an hour, then 4 hours, then a full day. The craving will subside and the urgency will pass as you consistently deny the reward. This deliberate delay is how you take back control and literally rewire your brain for peace and self-reliance. Regarding the smear campaign, your most powerful tactic is complete. Do not engage. Stop trying to track down every lie or defend your character to every single person he has manipulated or lied to. When you frantically chase the false narrative, you look panicked, defensive, and unstable, which ironically validates the narcissist's story for the very people he is controlling. Do not give his lies your precious energy or attention. Focus solely on your own well-being. Let the stories hang there. They are his problem, his reflection, not yours. Ignore the flying monkeys. They are often too deeply manipulated, too fearful of him, or too invested in his public fantasy to hear your truth. Do not try to convert or convince the narcissist's enablers. It is a waste of your valuable time and energy. They will report everything you say back to him instantly. Cut contact quickly and definitively with anyone who prioritizes the abuser's comfort and image over your truth and well-being. Protect your peace fiercely and without apology. Your entire healing process depends on this clean break. Your ultimate defense is to live well. Focus intensely and obsessively on stability, on rebuilding your physical and mental health, and on finding quiet, undeniable peace. Pour your energy into real connections, real hobbies, and true self-care that nourishes you. Build a life so centered, so stable, so genuinely happy, and so undeniably successful that his lies and chaos cannot penetrate it. Over time, the narcissist's pattern of behavior repeats with every new person they encounter, and the truth of their character will inevitably emerge for those who are truly paying attention. If the smearing crosses the line into damaging your livelihood or safety, document everything meticulously and seek appropriate legal protection. But always remember, the best, most powerful form of freedom is a life lived well, silently, and entirely free of their influence. This journey out of the trauma bond is difficult, gut-wrenching, and lonely at times, requiring immense strength, but you have the clarity now. That knowledge is power, the power to choose your own path and define your own reality away from his darkness. Don't waste that power by apologizing for someone else's choices and behaviors ever again. You deserve a life that is peaceful and genuine. You deserve safety and complete emotional freedom. If this video helped you understand how to take back your power and finally stop taking the blame, please like the video to support this channel and subscribe to stay strategically equipped on your path to healing and lasting freedom. See you in the next video.